So thanks everybody. Some amazing, amazing speakers here today, and I'm excited to introduce Mike Lightman, who is from Scientific Games, and Scientific Games is one of the leaders in real money lottery systems, online lotteries, and the company has had an amazing success run, and Mike is one of the guys responsible for that. He's had more than 20 years in the business. 20?
That's it.
All right. He started when you were like 3 or so. I think that was
that's the
it.
joke. But,
okay. You're right. We've used that one a couple times. All right. That would be the last version of that. He was also VP of Sales for Game Logic, internet-based player loyalty systems that they were developed, and early pioneering of that, and also in the regulated gaming industry. And as I said, VP of Business Development for Sciplay, which is a division of Scientific Games. Williams, right?
No, Sciplay is part of Scientific Games.
Okay, got it. All right. And so he's going to talk a little bit today about the intersection of social and real money gaming, and then take you on into lottery and give you the perspective of lottery, and talk about maybe some of the opportunities in lottery today.
All in 20 minutes.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Actually, it's been a very interesting couple days just hearing these different presentations going on, because when I go to a lot of real money gaming conferences, whether it be in the casino industry or the lottery industry, you get a very specific perspective. And then you come to a conference like this and you get a very different perspective. And then you put everybody in a room together, and as Charles Harper said before, it's like, you know, cats and dogs in the same bag, and it's very interesting. So just to help me out, how many people come from the real money gambling world in the room? Okay, well, maybe about 30%. I'm going to assume the rest are kind of from the casual space or some blend of the two. I'm going to give you kind of a little bit of a perspective from a supplier to the real money gaming world that's kind of evolving into the social world, or at least starting to borrow some of the learnings and findings and mechanics of the social world of how we see things kind of evolving. And I'll probably give you just another flavor, another data point as you kind of draw your own conclusions about how this stuff all comes together. So when we think of things, we kind of take it from the perspective of two people flip a coin and bet on the outcome, and now you have gambling. And then there's all sorts of shades from there as to whether it's lottery, casino, soft gambling, hardcore gambling, lots of stuff in between, and that becomes definitional on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis, and also on a player by player basis. But what we do know is in the world today, there's definitely kind of a spectrum, and that spectrum starts on one side with what we call kind of lottery, soft gaming, playing Powerball and Mega Millions and buying scratch tickets, all the way through to the other end of the spectrum, which is slot games and poker and things of that nature. And then there's some things that kind of fall in the middle. And most gamblers will kind of think of themselves someplace on that spectrum. Some portion of the population think of themselves as casino patrons. Other people think of themselves as lottery players. And a lottery player probably doesn't even think of themselves as a gambler, even though they're gambling. And so that's something we've kind of grown up with, has been the case for the last hundreds of years if there's been gambling, or thousands of years, I guess. But in the world of the internet, what we find is the same exact thing holds true. So when you talk about internet gaming, we actually see it as two kind of segments that kind of evolve into each other, flow into each other. The world of iLottery, where lottery organizations or folks who are authorized to run lottery games are selling those games and distributing them through the internet, and the world of iGaming, where casino games and casino-themed games are done for real money play on the internet. Rewards and loyalty have been around for a while on both of those, but more lately, the whole concept of social gaming or social game mechanics and virtual goods have not only taken on the personality of those same type of games, but the mechanics of those games are starting to find their way into real money gambling. And so that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today, is a little bit on iGaming and a little bit on iLottery, and just kind of give you a perspective of where both stand. So, while there's this spectrum out there, if I had to boil down the difference into kind of the most basic terms, it probably flows into that bottom statement there. When people play in a casino and they have a bad day, they come out and they say, I lost. When people play the lottery and they don't win $500 million in Powerball, they never say I lost, they say I didn't win. And there's something in there that really is the kernel of what's the difference between someone who's a lottery player and someone who's a casino player. But when it boils down, what we find is that a casino player or someone who's playing casino games, usually it's more of a session-based experience. They're going to sit down for an hour or more to play. They're expecting a high return in terms of the payback, in terms of the money they invest. They are, they're expecting this kind of session-based experience. On the lottery side, it's typically a much more casual, much more short-term 5-10-minute kind of play dynamic. They're not expecting to win as much, lower payout percentage. And those are the things that kind of find their way into the social games and what social games fit with each of these types of formats. On the gaming side of, casino side of social gaming, I think some of these slides I'm going to go through quick because I think you may have seen them already. But let's just talk about the real money side for a second. Real money, worldwide gaming sales, about $350 billion. So obviously a very big market. Casinos in 100 different countries around the world. Millions of slot machines. And that's starting to find its way into the iGaming space. Sports is still the predominant form of iGaming today. We hear a lot about poker. Poker in the US is probably the #1 thing people think about when they hear about iGaming, or at least it's the #1 top of a conversation. But beyond sports, which probably won't exist in any mainstream way in the United States for a long time to come, casino is really the biggest segment. And when we say casino, that includes slot machines, and slots are really the predominant gameplay in casino. Even in poker and bingo, the casino element, or especially the slot element, is huge. Bingo players are a lot of times stereotyped to be female, and they are. And they go in there, and half the money they spend is on slot games. Poker players oftentimes are obviously male, and they go in there, and half the time they play slot games. So it seems like bingo and poker for a lot of people is just their vehicle to admit that they're playing slot games. So really, slots is probably the big, in many ways other than sports, the biggest part of all that. The U.S. side, it translates through pretty proportionately. $64 billion industry in the U.S., 800 casinos in the United States in 39 different states. And today, obviously, iGaming sales are pretty modest because it's only legal in 3 states. And so, $3 billion is the estimate of what people are wagering in iGaming in the U.S. The predominant of that would be kind of gray market, not legal iGaming. And pre-UAGA, that was as much as $6 billion. So we expect that as it rolls out in the United States, it will grow pretty quickly beyond $6 billion. Why is social gaming interesting? Obviously, it's a new market. So $1.7 billion is what they say is the amount being spent on social casino-themed games around the world. About 700 million of it in the U.S. And depending on whose study you look at, that's going to grow to $3-4 billion over the next few years. But it's also important because of the number of people involved. 700 to 750 million people around the world are playing social games in general, and the casino portion of it is estimated at about 170 million people. The interesting fact here, though, as you kind of think that through, is the conversion rate from a player to a paying player is somewhere in that 2-3% range, maybe 5% on the high end, how you look at it. So the number of paying players is still a much smaller number there, but it's a big audience. The other reason why it's important is because of the demographics of the player. So as the mainstream brick and mortar casino industry looks for new players, there are certainly lots of them playing casino-themed games on the internet, and they represent a demographic that's younger than their bread and butter customers today, so important for any business. The question always, obviously, is does it translate over? Do people who play casino-themed games in the social gaming space translate to future, either current or future brick and mortar casino players or even iGaming players? That's a question I don't know the answer to. I think we've heard lots of opinions on that today and yesterday. Just to be a little bit of a contrarian, I pulled a slide out of a study we did about a year and a half ago in the UK. Now, the UK is a very different market than the US. You got to remember, in the UK, You can walk 10 feet and bet on about anything you want. You can go on the internet and choose anything from very, very casual social games all the way through to the most elaborate forms of iGaming you could ever want. So it's a very different market than the US. But we asked a few thousand people about their gaming habits. And what we found is that across the segment, casino games, poker games, bingo, there's lots of people who play for fun, lots of people who play for money, but the overlap was very limited. Curious to see how it's all going to happen here. I think in the beginning here there'll be a lot of overlap just because iGaming is not that widely available. But it'll be interesting to see whether this is just a snapshot in time or this is true, the true statistic as it really will play out. So kind of considerations on the casino-themed game side of things is social-based casino games match well with the social model. That's why they're so popular. We all know that kind of the proven real money casino themes, the games that are working well in the real casinos are working best as social games. What I don't think we know yet is how well do the players translate over, or is it just new markets for content that's proven to work in one segment will also work well in another segment. On the lottery side, this is probably an area that maybe not everybody knows as much about because it's a little bit more of a smaller community that's involved in this business, but it's a huge industry. Around the world, $276 billion a year in terms of the money wagered on lottery games, draw games, instant tickets, the likes. It's actually an industry that around the world is not yet that much online. Less than 15% of lotteries are selling their products online today, but it's changing everywhere. Outside the United States, it's changing pretty quickly. Here, it's just starting. Here in the US, 44 lotteries sell on the internet. 44 lotteries exist. 44 states, or 43 states in the District of Columbia operate lotteries, and it's about $70 billion a year. So it's a huge consumer business in the United States. A little bit more than half of that are in scratch tickets, and 147 million Americans play lottery games. So depending on the state you go to, it's somewhere between 50 and 60% of the population at some point during the year buys a Powerball ticket, buys a Mega Millions ticket, plays a scratch game. So it's a much broader industry than the casino industry. Any market that you go into, if you look up the stats of the websites being accessed in that market, the lottery is always in the top 5. It's very short visits. They're checking their numbers. They're looking up something, but it's always one of the top 5 websites being accessed in that market. But the idea of selling on the internet is very new here. Just 3 lotteries are kind of active in it: Illinois, Georgia, and Minnesota. And everybody's watching to see how those do and expect more to come. Lotteries up until this point have been doing a lot of kind of quote-unquote social things. More, I'll call them social light things. A lot of lotteries, when you buy a scratch ticket in the store, if you don't win, there's a code on it. You can go on the internet and play a game that has a lot of social mechanic type things in that game. They're starting to take those things and move them onto mobile. They're building rewards programs and other things that have a kind of a social kind of personality to them. But they're just starting to get into it, and they're certainly always today mostly tied to a brick and mortar kind of experience. An example is a game that's about to roll out, or is being rolled out as we speak, called Monopoly Jackpot. You can play a Monopoly-themed scratch ticket. If you don't win, you can go online and play a Monopoly-themed second chance game on the internet to try to win drawing entries and other prizes. You can collect things. You can do all the different types of things that have kind of proven themselves to work well in the social space. But as lotteries start to look to sell online, this itself kind of falls into 2 categories: selling their draw games on the internet and selling their instant games on the internet. I'm going to spend a couple seconds here on the internet, on the instant game side. Selling draw games on the internet is kind of just as you'd expect it. You're going online. You are buying your Powerball ticket off a website instead of standing in line at your local convenience store. And while there's kind of some social mechanic things you can build into that, I think the instant side will be a little bit more interesting to talk about. So as this starts to roll out, we see it kind of falling in 3 stages. Stage 1 is what I'll just call basic play. This is literally about as non-social as you can get. It's going on to a lottery's website. Instead of buying a ticket in the store, you're buying it on their website, and you're playing it on the screen in the exact same way you'd play it in the store. You're just moving your mouse over the scratch area, and you're scratching off what's there. And it's a mechanic that is obviously, as we call it there, very basic, but it's very important. It's what we're finding with lottery players. It's the #1 way to get them to start playing, to try, and to experience something that they're very familiar with. And it seems like even those lotteries in Europe that have been doing instant games on the internet for a while, this is still an important part of their portfolio. Kind of the second stage is what I'll call stage 2 up here, or extended play, and it's just adding some more interactivity. So, scratching that virtual latex area on a scratch ticket can get pretty boring after a while. Maybe not even after a while, after a pretty short period of time. So extended play is where you start adding just more interactive experiences into the game. Elements of choice, bonus features. This we find works really well with licensed themes. So all the themes that work well from a gaming space point of view, Monopoly, Slingo, Farmville, etc., they all work very well as themes to these type of games. But I think the place where this really starts to get exciting and really starts to resonate with new players, and probably where the folks who come to this conference would be most interested in understanding, is what I'll call up here stage 3, or social play. That's merging a instant ticket type of concept, which has a chance to win money, but it's not a great chance to win money. I mean, the average instant ticket for lotteries in the United States probably has about a 65% return to player, and about a 1 in 4 chance of even winning anything. So it's not, the person who's playing this is trying to win something, but the likelihood of them really winning something meaningful is not going to be nearly the same as playing a slot machine. But what can happen is you can start to merge the social mechanics that prove to engage people, create entertainment, really keep someone playing over the long run with the ability to win something, and create an experience for a player who's not looking for that hardcore gambling experience, but looking for a chance to win something and have some fun at the same time, and really create something new and different. And this is where we think the lottery world will really start to learn from the social gaming world and bring games to market that's going to just change the whole personality of what a lottery can do in terms of a chance to win money, but also engage a player. And this is where I think they'll get at new players and different players than they're currently used to having as customers today. So next steps we see in a lot of lotteries is, as I just said, kind of taking these mechanics, taking them and overlaying them onto the types of products that they are accustomed to selling and they can sell, and creating everything from opportunities for players to, instead of playing as a solitary experience, play with each other, in team experiences, multiplayer games, and ultimately, instant games that have those social mechanics in them. So, where that boils down to is that, lottery players and their personality matches very well with the social model. That's something that we see as really important, and really is going to be why this is part of the future of the lottery industry. This bringing those social mechanics is what's critical to that next generation real money lottery game. And it's those stage 3 instant ticket games, as I mentioned them, that's going to really emerge as the opportunity in the not too distant future, and is already starting to emerge as an opportunity in other parts of the world, that we really see as the big opportunity for where the types of folks who are developing games and are coming to a conference like this can really start to look at the lottery industry as a place for their ideas and their content and their vision of how things can work. From our own point of view, this is my one commercial slide. We work with a lot of lotteries. We are always looking for good partners with good ideas that can help us find content that we can bring to our lottery customers. So I'll leave that out there with everybody. But that's something that's very important to us. We're working with a handful today and looking for the right partners to work with in the future. And with that, I'll open it up to questions, but I only have 1 minute. Terry.
Next question yet. Would you comment on what's happening in the U.S. lottery industry with the three big name system suppliers all have created developer networks or studios, so game developers have a way to get introduced to the lottery business?
Three big name. I know Scientific Games.
Scientific Games.
I'm sorry. The other two escaped me for a second there. So, you know, I think the lottery industry is a very, what's the opposite of fragmented? You know, there are three major players, especially in the U.S., that supply all the lotteries with the technology and services that allow them to operate. You know, I'll speak for ourselves when I say that, you know, we see the kind of our role going forward is, again, continue to be a vehicle for providing that platform for lotteries to get their games to players. We also know that for ourselves, you know, we by no means expect to be the ones that have all the great ideas of how you bring social games and make them work with lottery games. We have some ideas, but we need partners to do that. So we are, you know, actively working with partners to bring their content to the lottery industry as they start to roll out.
What if you're an independent developer? Isn't there a lot involved in terms of regulation, in terms of licensing, getting the games approved? And if you want to build a game, independently bring it to you, you guys certify it, and then sell it to the lottery?
Yeah, so in our case, you know, where we have think of us as the pipeline, we have a GDK. We work with each developer to tailor that GDK specifically to them so we can bring their ideas and their mechanics to the marketplace. You know, we take on the responsibility for the things that would normally need to be regulated, you know, the determination of outcome, the things that, you know, the regulator is going to care about, making sure that it's done the right way so that our content partner doesn't need to go through all those steps.
It would be nearly impossible for them to go directly.
It would be, yeah, it'd be nearly impossible for them to go directly. I don't think everything from the public procurement process all the way through to the way regulation works would make it hard for them to go direct, and it probably wouldn't ultimately be cost justifiable given the, you know, given what it takes to get into this industry. And I am out of time. Thank you, everybody.